you have me. You have me as guest lecturer, and it's been a privilege for for me to speak to you for the second year. So,
Yeah.
and for most of you, believe these are new students. So my name is Antonio Heriberto Cabug, and they call me Toby. The students usually call me Sir Toby. And then I'm from the University of Santo Tomas. It's the oldest university in Southeast Asia. And I teach finance and accounting courses, but most especially management accounting and financial management. Okay? So as requested, you asked me to you asked me to teach on any topic in financial markets or financial management, and I would like to share my lecture on dividend policy because I believe for most of us investors, most of us who will be future and current investors, we would be interested in such a concern. Okay, so that's dividend policy. Next slide. So, what is a dividend? A dividend is a distribution of a portion of an entity's earnings. So, just a brief introduction. I believe most of you know this already. Whenever the company earns, it has the option of distributing the earnings to its shareholders. And yeah, it is to be paid to the shareholders. A distribution of a portion of an entity's earnings to be paid to the shareholders. Next. Now, whenever dividends are to be paid, they are to be approved first by the board of directors. At least that is how we do it, and in America, no? US and the Philippines, it is the board of directors who would have to declare it. And I believe in your case, somewhat similar, right? It's the board of directors who would declare the dividends. So
Yes.
they thank you for confirming, ma'am. So because I believe that in your case, you're very much influenced by UK, right? It's the UK who are your colonizers.
Yeah,
Ours is
yeah.
it's the
No.
UK. Okay.
Commonwealth country.
How are dividends set? No, right? How are dividends set? So that is the question that investors would be very much interested. Okay. So next slide. It depends on what we call the dividend policy. Okay, why should the company be concerned about the dividend policy? Next. Because there are people who would love current dividends. They want to they want to receive the fruits of the company's earnings now, while there are those who are interested in reinvesting the funds instead of giving it to them. They want the company to make use of the funds for future growth. Okay? So there is what we call an optimal dividend policy. The optimal dividend policy is one that strikes the balance between current dividends versus future growth. Okay? Versus future growth. So in practice, investors would be very much interested in the dividend policy because there are some investors who value receiving their earnings right now, and there are those who would value putting the earnings back in the company for future expansion, and of course anything in between, those two extremes. Maybe some would like it 50-50, 50% dividends, and then the 50% should be reinvested. Now, when we set an optimal dividend policy, it is one that strikes the balance between paying the current earnings immediately, current dividends, versus for reinvestment so that the company would grow. Whatever that dividend policy is, we have to remember that the goal of the company is to maximize shareholders' wealth. Whatever will make the shareholders happy, that is what we are to choose. Okay? Whatever will make the shareholders wealthy, maximizing shareholders' wealth. In practice, we would measure shareholders' wealth as the value of the shares, not the stock price. Okay, next slide. Let me move one step backward. There are those who propose that the dividend policy is irrelevant in arriving at shareholders' wealth. This is proposed by Modigliani and Miller. From here on, I'm going to refer to them as MM, Modigliani and Miller. According to these two, MM, whatever dividend policy you're going to set, whether it would be you're going to pay all of the earnings immediately as dividends, or you're not going to pay dividends at all, it wouldn't matter to the shareholders. We call this the dividend irrelevance theory. Whatever dividend policy you're going to choose, it doesn't really matter. Why? Because shareholders wouldn't care. Now, this theory, however, is set under a very strict set of assumptions. Meaning to say, most of these assumptions are not realistic. Okay? One of the assumptions is that the dividend will be relevant under the assumption that there are no taxes. Well, that alone is very unrealistic because we know for certainty that taxes is a reality. Taxes is a reality that we have to face. But this theory is banked under the assumption that there are no taxes. Another thing, there are no brokerage costs. Okay? So again, for this theory to work, certain assumptions that are unrealistic should be held true. We should hold them as true. There are no taxes, there are no brokerage costs. Okay? If such is the case, then the dividend will not matter to the investors. We call this the dividend irrelevance theory. Okay. So what I'm going to tell you now are violations of those assumptions to make our cases very much realistic. In the real world, there are no taxes. Sorry. In the real world, there are taxes. In the real world, there are brokerage costs. So this dividend irrelevance theory is not necessarily going to hold you true. It's not going to be true. Actually, no. In all cases, this is not going to be true. Okay, so this is just our baseline. The dividend will not matter. Okay, some of you might argue, but I want to receive my earnings right now. Why is Modigliani and Miller telling me that it doesn't really matter? Well, according to Modigliani and Miller, if you want to get a portion of your earnings right now, all you have to do is to sell a percentage of your shares. And there you go. You receive your homemade dividends. Your homemade dividends. Okay? What if I want that the company will reinvest my money? Then do nothing because the company is not going to give the dividends to you. But what if the company will give it to you? Then just buy more shares. Use the dividends to buy more shares. So Modigliani and Miller tells us that the investors can control whether or not the company will use the money for expansion or going to be distributed to the shareholders. Okay? If the company doesn't pay dividends, it's okay. You just sell a portion of your shares. And there you go. You have cash inflow. You do not want dividends, but the company is paying you dividends. Just use the money to buy the shares. Okay? This case is very much overly simplified because it is banked on several unrealistic assumptions. Right? Again, one of those assumptions, there are no taxes. In the real world, however, when the company would declare dividends, it is going to be subject to taxes on the part of the shareholders. Here in the Philippines, we are taxed at 10% for the dividends. Okay. So whenever the company would pay dividends, 10% of that would go to the government. Okay. So that is not factored in the dividend irrelevance theory. Again, what's the dividend irrelevance theory? The dividend irrelevance theory tells us that a firm's dividend policy has no impact on shareholders' wealth. The shareholders will not mind whether you declare dividends or not, because the shareholders can counter whatever action that they do not want. The company doesn't pay dividends. It's okay. The shareholder can sell a portion of the stocks so that it will become cash. Okay? The company pays dividends, but the shareholders doesn't want. Then use the dividends to buy additional shares so that the money is still in the company. Again, what is the defect of this theory? The assumptions are very much unrealistic. When I say it is unrealistic, it assumes that there are no taxes. Okay? So when dividends are declared, the problem is the shareholders will be taxed. Okay? So this is the reason why the dividend irrelevance theory is not working in the real world. Okay, next slide. So what do investors prefer? Okay? Some investors prefer to have dividends declared, as I have mentioned a while ago. Why? They need cash flow. Who are these people who would need cash flow? Does any one of you who prefer dividends? Do you prefer a company?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. As a shareholder, the shareholders would need their return on their investment.
Oh, yeah. Some would prefer dividends. Okay. So if you would love that you would feel the earnings from your investments now, you prefer dividends. On the other hand, next, some people would prefer that the earnings would be reinvested to the company. In other words, do not pay the dividends yet. Leave the money to the company so that the company will reinvest it, and then the company will grow further. Okay? They want to forego the use of cash to some future time. Are there anyone here who would prefer this method? There's none. We all want we all want to earn.
Yeah, we want the first one. We do
Well,
not want to delay gratification. No.
well actually yeah, I noticed that, especially now, at least here in the Philippines, the
Mm-hmm.
stock market is not, it's not really moving much. How about how about in your
Yeah,
case?
here too, Toby. Here too. It's not moving. The index is like going up 4 points and then going down 6 points and then go. It's very stagnant.
Yeah, the sentiment, especially us here in Southeast Asia, we are
Yeah.
we are relying from foreign funds. Is that true to
Mm.
you?
Yeah. Same here. Same in our
Okay,
country.
foreign funds. So unless there is certainty that the interest hikes in the US will stop,
Mm.
the Americans will not come to rescue our markets.
Yeah. Because they are investing over there, right?
Yeah, they're investing there, and the valuations are going down because of the
Mm.
higher discount rates due to the
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why for a lot of us right now, in the current macroeconomic environment, we are very happy to receive dividends, because that is the that is the only way that we can experience gains. Okay, so however, I hope we're going to pass this stage uh, sooner or later. But
Yeah. Hopefully, hopefully sooner rather than later.
sooner rather than later, yeah. So when that time comes, some of us would prefer to delay gratification because we can feel the stock prices go up, right? Okay. So next. So in a normal day, there are two types of people and anything in between. Those who prefer to receive the dividends now and those who prefer to delay the gratification and let the company invest it. If there are a lot of investment opportunities, okay, now is not the time, but sooner, hopefully, when investment opportunities will come, there are those people who would like to delay receiving money so that the money will grow further. Future growth will be faster. Okay? Because of these two kinds of people, because of these two kinds of people, companies should select who is what set of people are their clientele. So we call this the clientele effect. This is the reason why there are some companies who are referred to as dividend stocks, or in Malaysia you call it income stocks, right? They set high dividends.
Yes. Mm-mm.
They're called income stocks or dividend
Yeah.
stock. In this
Dividend stock,
case,
income stocks. Yes.
what they do is they pay a lot of their earnings in the form of dividends regularly. This
And
is to
sometimes, excuse me, and sometimes without profit, they still declare dividends.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I actually have an example later on. Yeah, even though they are not earning in the same year, they would still pay dividends.
Mm.
In the case of Malaysia, what kind of companies would usually do that?
Telecommunication companies, the electricity, utility companies usually they pay regular dividends.
Okay. So it's
Mm.
very much similar here in the Philippines.
Mm.
Actually, we have the telephone
Mm.
communication companies, telco
Mm.
companies.
Telcos, yes.
The telcos would pay around 4 to 7% dividends per year. And then for power companies, yeah, especially power,
Mm.
utility power,
Mm.
they pay around 3 to 5%. Is the range similar in Malaysia?
Yeah, about that. I think in Malaysia, the power company and the telecommunication company, it's about the same
As the same.
mm, dividends rate.
Do you have a real estate investment trust in Malaysia? REITs?
Yes, we have. Currently, some are doing well, some are not.
Yeah, of course,
Mm.
because
It depends on the place,
okay,
on the building to where it's at.
currently the rates here
Mm.
are paying the good ones are actually reinvesting well, so they pay smaller, but the most of them they it would range around 5 to 6%.
Oh, that's high.
Yeah, because
That,
the rents in the capital and
uh,
metropolitan cities they were able to maintain their
occupancy
rents.
occupancy is high, is it?
Yeah, this year in the
Mm.
Philippines.
Mm.
We haven't moved really to purely purely Zoom based meetings. We really crave for human interaction. So we cannot get rid of office spaces yet.
Yeah, here too, here too.
You're
It's
going
quite
back.
low. Actually, for now, it's quite high, but usually it's higher, right?
Yeah,
For REITs, real investment trust dividends, it should be higher. But currently, because of the COVID, I am informed that it's lower because they are not profitable much today at this current time.
when were rates introduced to you in Malaysia? Was it a long time ago?
I think it's a long time ago because when I started, it's already there. When I started investing.
In the Philippines, the rates just started in 2020. In this,
Oh, okay.
so we have no basis for comparison of how it
Uh-huh.
should earn. So the first rate was introduced 3 months after the pandemic. payments.
Oh, all right. Okay, it's new. We have like I think more than 5 years in Malaysia. More than 5 years, I should say.
Oh,
Because we have REITs for the pavilion. In KL we have pavilion REITs and we have KLCC REITs.
KLCC. Okay.
Yeah, KLCC. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sorry for interrupting.
No, I really love the interaction because I can also learn from.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so the point that I'm making here is that in normal times, in the current times, most of us would prefer dividends, but in normal times, some of us would prefer
Mm,
capital growth, a stock price increase rather than dividends. This is especially true if you are in your 20s and you do not have a family yet.
yeah.
That mind
Mm,
not receiving the money yet because you can work. So
yeah.
what you want is that the company would reinvest it for you
Yes. Yes.
projects. But for now, whether you are young or old, it doesn't really matter. You really
Mm,
crave dividends. Okay, I'll give more examples later on. So in
okay.
normal times, there are those who prefer dividends, there are those who prefer capital growth. So the
Mm,
company should select what kind of shareholders it would cater. That's why we call this the clientele effect. It is as if you are serving a particular demographic of people as your primary shareholders. We call this the clientele effect. So companies should choose whom to please. Are we going to
mm,
please the people in group A who love dividends?
mm,
We call that the clientele effect.
mm,
Next. Okay. Now, in the textbook's example of dividends, in the textbook cases of dividends, the most popular one is the residual dividend model. According to the residual dividend model, dividends paid should be set in a way that earnings will be used for investment first. Any excess earnings will be declared as dividends. So I'm going to give a problem solving example. Next slide. Okay, sample case. ACE targets a debt to equity ratio of 60% debt to 40% equity. The company projects that its capital budget for the coming year will be 4 million pesos. If ACE reports a profit of 3 million pesos and it practices the residual dividend policy, what will be its dividend payout ratio? Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how the residual dividend policy is. So the first question is, are we going to invest? Do we have investments in the coming year? For that question, the answer is yes. We expect it to be 4 million pesos. The second question is, what portion of the project is normally financed by equity? To answer that question, look at the debt to equity ratio. It's 60-40. So that would be 40% equity. Okay? Now, what are we going to do with our profit of 3 million? We use it first for the investment in the capital budget. Okay? Next slide. Okay. So, dividends should be formulated in such a way that whenever we would use our net income for capital budgeting, whatever excess we have should be declared as dividends. Okay. So next line. Next line. We have a net income of 3 million pesos. Deduct the portion of the net income that would be used for the capital budget. 4 million is our capital budget. It's 40% financed with equity. So that would be 1.6 million. 3 million minus 1.6 million, that's 1.4 million. Okay, you have 1.4 million which you can freely use for dividends. Okay? So, what's the logic behind the residual dividend policy? Well, think of it this way. whenever the company generates income, whenever the company generates income, what happens is it is available for capital expansion. The retained earnings is usable for capital expansion. Okay? If we have retained earnings, if we have retained earnings and use it for capital expansion, we do not need to issue stocks in the market. That would save us brokerage cost, also known as flotation cost. Okay? So what happens is if we use the retained earnings, the money that we already earned, in order to finance the projects, what happens is we are able to save on brokerage costs, bid-ask spread, whatever the investment banks are charging the company in raising capital. Okay? So putting it in another way, using retained earnings, the funds from retained earnings, is cheaper than issuing new fresh stocks in the market. As such, it would be a wise decision to use the money for capital projects first before we use it to pay for dividends. That is the logic behind the residual dividend policy. So the question was, what is the payout ratio? So the payout ratio is the dividends divided by the net income, 3 million. Next line. Okay. 1.4M divided by 3M. That would be 46.67%. So that is the answer. 46.67%. Again, what's the logic behind the residual dividend policy? It goes like this. When you use your retained earnings to fund the projects first, you do not need to issue new shares in the market. Because when you issue new shares, you would be subject to brokerage costs, flotation costs, which is added outflow of the company. So the wise thing to do is to use the retained earnings first for capital projects. If ever there's any excess, that's the time that we can declare as dividends. Okay? Next slide. So my question to you is, the residual dividend policy, does this happen in the real world? Next. Okay. What do you think? Anyone? Does the residual dividend policy happen in the real world?
Anyone? What do you think? True or false? Nobody's answering.
No one's answering. Yeah. Any just give me an honest. Okay. So we have what's this?
As you, I think as per any other cases, I don't think so. It doesn't happen like this in the real world because that's the theory, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so if we're going to be realistic about it, the residual dividend policy is not applicable in the real world because, as what you have mentioned, ma'am, people would love a stable dividend, right? We want to receive stable dividends, especially the logic behind public utilities and telco. Regardless whether there's profit or not, we would want to keep the dividends stable. The reason is that investors do not love the uncertainty of cash flow.
Yeah.
Okay. If we are to use the residual dividend policy, there will be years where there are a lot of projects. There will be no more money left for dividends.
Yeah.
And then there will be years that there are no projects. The dividends will be too high that you cannot sustain. So in the real world, people, the shareholders in particular, are very much concerned about the stability of the dividends. Sometimes they
Mm.
would be willing to receive small dividends as long as it is sustainable in the next 5 years. Next
Mm.
step. For this reason, most companies, I would say 99% of the companies, would not use the residual dividend policy, even though
Mm.
it sounds practical.
Yeah.
Okay? So, definitely, a lot of the things in our classroom is not suited in the real world. I really
Yeah. It's
want
theory.
curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is the problem with the residual dividend policy. If we will strictly follow the residual dividend policy, what happens is in years where there are a lot of investment opportunities, the company will not declare dividends. In the
Mm.
years there are no investment opportunities, the company will declare the entire net income as dividends.
Yeah.
If that happens, the shareholders will be confused.
Yeah.
What kind
The
of company is?
fluctuates too much.
Yeah, it's
The
fluctuating.
dividend payment,
Yeah,
it fluctuates. Mm.
fluctuates too much.
Mm.
So the shareholders will have an impression that the company is not being properly managed due to that
Mm.
fluctuations. So in the real world, nobody uses the pure residual dividend policy. Okay? So let's
Yeah.
other concepts. Next.
Oh.
Okay, the dividend preference theory. This is very much applicable nowadays. Next line. According to the dividend preference theory, a return in the form of dividends is a sure thing. Okay, most of us in this economic climate, no, in this business climate, most of us, okay, sorry for that. Okay, I had got a glitch here. Okay, okay, it's good now. Okay, for most of us now, we do prefer dividends due to the fact that nobody is earning much from nobody's earning much from capital growth in this macroeconomic environment, in this current macroeconomic environment. So accordingly,
Mm.
shareholders would love dividends because it is a sure thing.
Yep.
A return in the form of capital gains is risky, especially if you're very much interested in receiving it now. You would love the dividends to be given now. So, now. Okay?
Yeah.
The metaphor that they usually use is that a bird in the hand is worth more than two birds in the bush.
Yeah.
Because once you are holding the bird, you know that that bird is
That-
yours.
yes.
While those in the bush, you still have to catch it, even though they are two of them.
Yeah.
So
Risky. Mm.
therefore, shareholders prefer dividends and are willing to accept a lower required return on equity. So our required return for the company, we are willing to have it lower as long as it is given to us in the form of dividends. So
Mm.
that's the believer of the bird in the hand theory. The
Dividend.
acronym for this is bird in the hand theory, the dividend preference theory. Okay, next. Now, here's the opposing theory for the dividend preference theory, the tax effect theory. For active traders, this is especially true for active traders. They do not want dividends because dividends are taxed at a higher rate in the stock market. Because dividends are in some cases taxed more highly than capital gains, investors might require a higher pre-tax return to induce them to buy dividend paying stocks. Therefore, investors may prefer that companies minimize their dividends. Okay, in the Philippines, when you receive dividends, there's a final tax of 10%. How is it in your country? Are you also taxed?
Yeah, we're taxed, but it's in our income tax. It's combined together with all our incomes, other incomes, and then we're taxed based on that. It's not
Oh,
a specific tax for dividend. It's considered as our income.
oh, what's the
Unlike capital gains, capital gains are taxed aside from our income, yearly income. So
oh
it might go up to like 24%. Depends on your total income.
okay. So your dividends will become part of your
Annual
income.
income. Yeah.
Ah, so if you are taxed at 24%, your
Then
dividends will also be
yeah.
taxed. Ah, okay. Yeah, I actually studied, no, just a side just a side talk. I actually studied the tax for UK. I used to study for ACCA. Is the is the UK tax similar to Malaysia or very different as well?
I'm not sure because I'm not familiar. I don't teach tax, but that is the forte for what Miss Nur Wan Nurul Basira. She's teaching tax. But from what I know, my practical thing is that it's included in our income, and whatever our income level is, we're gonna be taxed based on that. If your payment is low, you're lower in, if you consider as lower income, then you pay lower tax. If you're higher, then you be paying higher taxes. The
Okay.
rate will be higher.
Okay. So so I'm
I'm not sure about UK. I cannot
so
compare.
so it's actually really an interesting thing that whenever you are going to receive dividends, um you would have to report it in your tax return, right? Because in the Philippines, when you are going to do that, nobody's going to report. Nobody's going to report, considering the collection system is not that advanced here. Whenever whenever you have extra income, a lot of us, many of many of the people I know, they can get away with that. Maybe that's the reason why here in the
They do
Philippines,
not declare. Do you mean?
it's very more, the tax laws here are very much strict, but a lot of the middle income earners, they can get away with taxes. The only ones who cannot get away with taxes are the top companies. That's the unfortunate
Yeah,
reality.
yeah.
So
Because their transactions are transparent, unlike the retailers, right?
yeah,
Mm.
so that's the tax return. So here in the Philippines, so that our computations, so that the taxes will be collected immediately before we receive the dividends, they will take automatically. The company will withhold 10% in our tax. I think that is fair because that's a small rate compared to our usual rate. Most of us here in the Philippines, our taxes range from 15 to 25%. So that's already as a good compromise, 10% final tax. So if we are a believer of the tax effect theory, we would believe that shareholders are not inclined to receive dividends because it will become part of the taxable income. Capital gains, on the other hand, can be delayed unless or until you sold the stock. You are not taxed at the time of sale. Is that true in Malaysia? So at least here in the Philippines, that's how we do it. Whenever we experience capital gains, we will not be taxed unless it will be sold. And then if we do it in the stock market, the most that we are going to pay is only 1/2% of the entire stock's value.
For stocks, in our country, if you have capital gains, it's not taxed. But from this year onwards, they are thinking about it. Our
Yeah,
government is thinking about taxing capital gains. But
yeah.
before, it's not taxed for stocks.
There's
If
that.
for other assets, then we are taxed.
Oh,
Mm.
it's really actually a good investment, at least for now, since
Yeah,
they are not yet taxing it.
yeah. For now,
So what happens here is that whenever we sell a stock, the most that we would 1/2%. That's point.
that's quite low. That's okay. I think that's a reasonable rate.
Yeah.
1.5
So,
percent.
Toby,
Yes, ma'am.
Toby, in Philippines, capital gains are taxed, right?
If it is a stock in the stock exchange, is it buying
Okay.
the stock exchange? It is
So that
not
means,
to be taxed at a capital gains tax rate, but rather we call it we call it VAT. But instead of
value added tax.
paying the full VAT rate, because it's usually 12%, for stock market transactions, it's only 1/2%.
So every time you sell and get capital gain, then you would have to report, is it?
Actually, it's automatically being
Oh,
withheld.
it's automatically. So they will know if you cannot run away from that tax.
So what the government in the Philippines does is that it deals with the institutions,
All right.
trust people to pay their taxes. So they're going to take it away immediately. Because
Okay.
once the money comes to us, there's a 90% probability that we will not declare it.
Yeah,
They're not
definitely.
gonna
I think
get
it's
that.
99% possibility.
Yeah, who wants to pay tax?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's a difference. I don't really know, but I think that the culture in the Philippines, whenever we can get away with things, we're going to do it. Yeah, that's the problem.
I think
I think
it's the
it's
same
anywhere in the world.
everywhere. It's human nature.
Yes.
For your salary, is it, do you pay your salary to the government, or the company will withhold it?
They withhold
um,
it. Kan?
Ah,
I mean, they deduct
they
every month.
automatically deduct
Mm,
from our salary the
it's
tax.
the same.
Mm.
mm.
They automatically as well.
Easier that way. For them, it's easier that way, right?
Yeah. So basically, as much as possible, they do not want to deal with individuals because that would be time consuming. So they do it that way.
Mm. Yep.
So if ever there's a tax on capital gains, it is usually in most countries, I believe in most countries, it's very small compared to the dividend income tax. So this is the reason why there are other investors, due to the tax effect theory, who would prefer that they would receive capital gains. They would experience an increase in the stock price and wait until retirement
Ah.
rather than receiving the dividends now. Because when dividends will be paid to them, it will be taxed and then reinvest it. The earnings of that in the form of dividends again will be taxed. So there will be multiple cycles of taxation. So that's the reason why some would prefer capital gains. Okay. Next. Okay. This one is something that we should learn. This is a very practical theory. This is very much applicable. We call this the information content or signaling theory. According according to this theory, dividends send signal to the shareholders. For example, when the dividends expect that you are going to pay them dividends regularly, and then come this year, you did not pay dividends, they are going to take it against you. And what happens is the stock price would plummet.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
It happens. Mm. For as an example, in our country, Top Glove. I don't know whether you have heard of Top Glove, our biggest glove manufacturing company. They used to pay lots of dividends, and suddenly they say they cannot afford to pay, and now their stock price is like very low.
Oh, so it also happens there, right?
Yeah.
So the logic here is that investors interpret dividend declarations as signals of the business prospects, Now, I personally hold one of our manufacturing company here. This is a very small company. Next slide. Okay. This is CIC. What they do is they manufacture air conditioners and refrigerators. So this stock, if you are going to look, can we zoom at the bottom? Can we zoom at the bottom?
You have to zoom. How do I zoom this thing?
But if you can see that dip over there, that is 2 days after the dividend declaration. They used to pay 1 peso dividend. Lower.
Hold on. How do I zoom this?
Yeah,
This
that
one?
letter D.
Okay.
Yeah, that letter D. Okay. That's around 2 days before the dip in the stock price. What happened here is that they usually pay 1 peso per share every year. But this year, they paid only 50 cents. So that's 1/2 of the usual dividend. So even though the market is already aware that the earnings of the company is not right, the earnings were shown 2 weeks before the dividends were declared. The earnings were actually released 2 weeks before. Although they already know that the earnings are not good for the company, they waited for the dividend to make a decision of whether or not to hold the stock. So 2 days after the dividends were declared, and the dividends were very low, 50% than the usual. So what happened is the stock price dip. So that dip there, the one represented by the green line, the long green, yeah, that is due to
Sorry.
okay.
This one.
Yeah, so I can also have many examples, but I'm really I'm really I'm really amazed that your manufacturing companies as well, no? We really have the same story. Manufacturing has been hit, and their ability to pay dividends were also were also adversely affected. Okay, so this
It's
is
the
just
same case.
so
Many companies face the same case, the same situation.
yeah, it's also manufacturing, right? Your biggest,
Yeah.
but this is a very small company. They manufacture air conditioners and refrigerators called Condura. But they also import. You're familiar with the brand Carrier? They also import Carrier to the Philippines. But they also have air. I still think as part. Okay, next. This is a side topic. Stock dividends. Technically speaking, stock dividends and stock splits are not really dividends in the way that dividends are distributions of income. Okay, stock splits are just ways to divide the number of shares outstanding to more stocks rather than an actual. A stock split is an increase in the number of shares outstanding by replacing each share outstanding with more shares. For example, if there is a stock split of 2 for 1, one stock split, and the company has 1 million shares outstanding, What it means is that they will divide the equity to 2 million shares outstanding. They will take the 1 million and replace it with 2 million par value. And then we have stock dividends. A stock dividends are dividends given to the shareholders in the form of additional shares of the company instead of cash. This is just a transfer from retained earnings to capital stock, but the total shareholders' equity, they are still the same. So in other words, stock dividends and stock splits are just accounting treatments with no real change in the value of the company. Okay, simple
Mm.
example. The next slide. So we have here Housegate Corporation stock trade at 90 a share. It is contemplating a 342 stock split. What is the expected stock price after the stock split? We started off with 90 a share. Next line, 90. Okay. So we started off with 90. We are going to multiply it by the number of stocks taken. They took two from us. So whenever we have two shares, the company will take back the two shares. So 2 times 90 is 180. And they're going to replace it with 3. That's the meaning of 342 stock split. They will take 2 of that and replace it with 3. So the value is still 180. 180 divided by 3. The value of each share is now 60. Are we better off before or after the stock split? Just really,
Same.
yeah. It's really there's really no substantial change in our equity. However, this is useful in making the stock more liquid because when the stock price is so high, there is a psychological effect that we think that the company is expensive, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
There's no meaning in that. When we see that the stock price is high, we have an impression that it's expensive. But in fact, that's not the basis.
Yeah.
So here in the Philippines, we usually sell our fruits in kilograms. How about you?
Same.
It's also in kilograms. We also use.
Yeah.
So what happens like 10 years ago, instead of selling it per kilo, they sell it per 500 grams. To make the price more affordable,
Cheaper.
they are going
Mm.
to put the price for half kilo rather than 1 kilo. So
Yeah.
now,
Making it affordable, yes. Mm.
right now, they show the prices usually in the grocery, in the market, per
Mm.
Per
5
kilo. Yeah.
rather than 1 kilo.
Mm.
So that's the psychological effect of a stock split.
Yeah.
It makes it look more affordable,
Smaller.
even though there's no real change in the value. And
I
then
think
see,
big companies they do this, like Tesla, Google, Apple, they do have stock splits. And they do it like quite frequently.
yeah,
I think that's the case.
Because the stock price is too high. I mean, relatively very high. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons they split it to make it look cheaper.
yeah, but the
Yes.
problem with them is that even though one stock I cannot afford.
Yeah, yeah. That's why when they do
Even
stock
after the
split,
split.
we can afford, like if like Tesla, the other day they split like a 5, right? So it comes to like $200 per stock as
Per
compared
share.
to 1,000 per share. So
Yeah.
it makes it a bit affordable, a
Yeah,
bit.
A bit.
At least
A
you can
bit.
have one.
yeah, that's what I noticed. Even one share I cannot afford. That's it.
Yeah,
The
because we
stock.
have to convert and everything, right? Mm.
Yeah,
But for others maybe they can, and I think that's the reason why they do that also. They want to make it affordable and liquid.
there are now brokers in the US where you can buy half a share. I believe
Uh
it's oh
I think they have. They
yeah.
have. Yeah, they have. You can buy 50% or 30% of the shares. You are
Yeah,
allowed. But not
because
here in Malaysia.
very
In Malaysia,
expensive.
we don't have. Yeah. In Malaysia, I think the minimum that we can buy is 100.
100.
Mm.
Uh, in
What
the
about the
Philippines,
Philippines? How many?
it depends on the stock price. We have what we call a board lot
Oh.
for stocks that are trading above 1,000 pesos. We
Uh-huh.
can buy 10 shares minimum.
10.
Oh,
If it is,
Oh.
but if the stock price is 100 pesos, we should buy a minimum of 100.
Uh-huh. Here, it's across the board 100. It costs one lot. It's one lot, 100 units. It doesn't matter what price.
Oh, even though it's 1 ringgit.
Yep, even though it's one ringgit, or even if it's 10 cents.
a few cent only.
Mm.
Oh, really? You can buy
Yeah,
100 shares of 10
one lot,
cents.
100 shares. Yeah. So it's affordable for people to buy.
Ah,
Mm.
so yeah, that's basically the reason for stock splits. But nowadays, depending on how the brokers will evolve, there will come a time that we would be able to buy even half a share, just the way in the US it is. Next slide. We now have the stock dividend. Stock dividends act in a similar way, except that the capital stock will increase due to the fact that we transfer retained earnings to the capital stock. In this case, Housegate Corporation stock trade at 90 pesos a share. It is contemplating a 50% stock dividend. So for every one share, you receive one half. So what we do is we divide the stock price by 1 plus the stock dividend rate. In this case, 90 divided by 1.5. The stock price after would be 60 pesos. So they act in a very similar way, that is making the stocks more affordable. But instead of decreasing the par value, what they do is they transfer retained earnings to the capital stock to increase the number of shares outstanding so that the value of the company will be distributed among more stocks. So that's how they do it. Okay. So next. Okay. Then we also have what we call stock repurchases. In the Philippines, we call this stock buyback, but in the textbook, they usually call it repurchases. So
Same here. The term in Malaysia also buybacks.
you also call it buyback.
Mm. Buyback.
The textbook term is repurchase, but yeah, we call it.
Mm.
It's an act again.
Nowadays, I read many companies are doing this. They are buying back their stocks.
Yeah, especially now because the
Stock
stocks
price.
are very low.
Mm.
So a lot of the stocks now are undervalued for a long time. So what the companies do is that they buy their own stocks. So that's the current trend nowadays. And then in the Philippines, currently a lot of real estate companies are doing this because the stock prices of real estate companies are going low. It's a miracle that our rates are actually performing well. But for real estate companies, they are not really doing good yet due to the depressed price of land and properties. So because of their low stock price, they're taking advantage by buying back your own shares. So a stock repurchase is an action wherein an entity buys back its own shares, decreasing the shares outstanding and distributing cash. What is good about a stock repurchase or a buyback is that the stockholders are not expecting that this is going to happen all the time. The problem with dividends is that once you pay dividends this year, the stockholders would expect the same next year. So if you have excess cash and you believe that the stocks are undervalued, the best way to distribute cash is through a stock repurchase program. By doing so, by doing so, you do not create an expectation that there will be a cash distribution in the next year. Okay? So making this a good alternative to dividends. Okay. Next. So in this case, we have here sample case. PNE Industries has earnings of 400,000. It has 200,000 shares of common stock outstanding. The company's stock is currently valued at 32 pesos a share. BNE considers a plan in which it will use available cash to repurchase 20% of its shares in the open market. So this is a stock buyback. The repurchase is expected to have no effect on the earnings. What will be BNE's stock price following the repurchase? So if we have 400,000 pesos, sorry, 200,000 rather, 200,000 shares of common stock outstanding. 20% of 200,000, that's 40,000, right? They are going to buy back 40,000 shares outstanding. Currently, the earnings per share is, next slide. Currently, the earnings per share is 400,000 over 200,000. Okay. The earnings per share before the stock repurchase program, 400K over 200K, that's 2 pesos per share. The price to earnings ratio is 32 divided by 2, 16 times. Okay? 16 times. That's the price to earnings ratio. Now, if we are going to push through with the buyback, instead of 200,000 shares, 20% of that is 40K. So 200K minus 40, 160. The new earnings per share would be 400,000 divided by 160,000. It will be 250 per share. If the PE ratio of 16 times is a good estimate of value, we would expect that the stock price would rise to 40 pesos a share, at least in 16 times the new EPS of 250. So the new stock price should be 16 times the EPS. It becomes pesos. Okay. So again, I mentioned the word theory because in practice, it doesn't follow that the stock price would rise that much.
Yeah.
That-
So this is in calculation only, right?
yeah. This is
What
uncal-
happens in the market, we do not know. We cannot predict, but that's how it's supposed to be, right?
yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. Right? Okay, so that is the stock value in theory. Okay, so again, what's good about the stock repurchase program? The company is not expected that this will happen regularly. Next slide. Okay, so in theory, it is a wise decision to use a residual dividend model. In an ideal world where the stockholders are fully aware, fully trust the company is knowing what it is doing, the stockholders do not mind how much dividends are being declared, it is a good idea to use the residual dividend model. Use the funds for investments first. Any excess after satisfying the equity portion of the investment part can be distributed in the form of dividends to the shareholders. In an ideal world where the shareholders are trusting. They believe that the company is acting in their best interest. They do not question anything. They wouldn't mind fluctuating dividends. They do not mind that there are no dividends this year. We have used the residual dividend model. In practice, however, shareholders do not act like that. They act with suspicion towards management due to the agency conflict. Okay? So what companies can do is bullet two, X, use an active policy model. Next. Okay. To set an active dividend policy. Next. What it means is that we are going to set a policy that attracts a certain clientele, a set of investors. Because dividends have information content. They send a signal about the company's performance or position. So in practice, companies should set an active dividend policy rather than just following whatever theory which they believe is the best. They should know who their clientele are. Are their clientele retired investors? If the investors are retired, they're very much conscious about the dividends. So they should pay them regardless. If their clientele risk takers, they do not mind about the dividends, do not pay them dividends. Okay? Set an active policy that would attract a clientele and make sure to keep them. Now, if you would want to distribute, if the company would want to distribute a one-time excess cash, bullet number three, X, the company should perform stock buyback or stock repurchases. Debit, treasury shares, the accounting treatment. Credit, cash. Okay? This is a one-time distribution of cash. If you have a lot of excess cash now, believe the company is undervalued, then by all means, stock repurchase or buyback could work efficiently. Okay? I think this discussion has been so fast. I was expecting more talk. Are there any questions?
Can you explain a bit about the treasury shares? What do they do actually with the treasury shares?
Treasury share.
Mm.
Yeah, this is more of an accounting. The Do you use the same term in Malaysia? Treasury shares. When the stocks are repurchased by the company, they call it treasury shares here in the Philippines. So these treasury shares are those shares that were previously issued but were taken back by the company.
Mm.
And
Are they distributed internally, or are they just like cancelled?
in the Philippines, what we do is we can take it back. The company will buy its own shares and not yet cancel it. Just keep it issued. It is still issued, but not anymore outstanding. That's
Mm.
what treasury shares.
Will it be given to the board of directors or distributed among the top management or like
Yeah,
that? Or
it can be any shares held by the whether it would be for cancellation, can be one, or for distribution holders, one. We label it as treasury.
Toby, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Can you repeat? We can't hear you just now
Okay.
about the treasury shares.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So whenever there are shares that were previously issued
Mhm,
and then the company would want to take it back
mhm,
for whatever reason, the reason can be for cancellation, as you have mentioned,
mhm,
to be given to the managers and board of directors. We
mhm,
label it as treasury shares. We label it as.
mhm. Okay. Alright. Any question? Students? Enough questions from me. Are you all clear? There are 52, I think about
60,
60 students, is it?
60 something. Yeah.
60. We're supposed to have 60 students with us today. And I hope they get what we have discussed so far. And as a basis, because they are supposed to, for their course, they are supposed to do their self-learning for this topic. So today, actually,
We have helped them actually.
we have helped them with the they do not have to find their own readings. We provide them with that, and very thank you very much, Toby, for your
Toby, one quick
very,
question. Is that okay?
yeah.
Yes, I'm very-
With regards to the clientele effect just now,
yes.
whereby the company would have to basically identify what type of shareholders that they have, right? So if I mean, in order to set a dividend policy, whether to pay dividend or to retain. But is it practical to do so? I mean, how does a company do that? Or maybe, or is it when the shareholders are not happy with the company, then they will just sell off their shares? That is how the company know that their shareholders don't like that.
Yeah, it's actually a trial and error type. So whenever you already have a clientele, after those who are not happy with you left, it would be an ideal thing to do to keep whoever was left and to grow team.
With whoever who is left.
And
think
as a practical example, we
Uh.
have Disney. We have Disney. Disney is a dividend stock in the US.
Mhm.
The US, their standards are low. A 2% to 3% dividend is already a good dividend. So the investors of Disney are usually those people who prefer dividends. Now, as times are changing, cable is no longer a household necessity. Do you still use cable?
Yep. No, yeah, we still use cable.
In my we no longer use cable. We just buy
Oh.
Netflix. We just buy Disney Home. So in these changing times, Disney can no longer rely on the cable as a reliable stream of income.
Yep.
So it's no longer a wise idea to maintain a clientele of dividend-loving stockholders. There are analysts 2 years ago, an analyst who suggested to Disney to cut off the dividends. Why?
Oh.
Because it's no longer sustainable. Their as a cable channel is threatened by the current generation of families because new families now are no
They do.
longer availing cable. We just buy Netflix, we just buy
Yes.
whatever.
We
So
can use YouTube.
yeah, YouTube is actually already a good source for small films. So
Yeah.
So what the analyst is suggesting to Disney is rather on clinging to the current shareholders is to replace its clientele. So in the process, we are going to suffer a dip in the stock price because of the change of hands. They will transfer it from those people who want dividends to those who are willing to take more risk, investing in new investing in new technology such as the Disney Home and maybe making innovations in Disneyland.
Yeah.
Silan cannot survive with its current state. It needs to have maybe more attractions. Okay,
Yeah.
things cannot guarantee a stable dividend.
Mm.
The reason why they have to change their clientele.
Do you mean that they have to change from income stocks to growth stock?
Growth stocks.
Yes, yes,
Mm.
they have to change it that way.
Mm.
And in the process, the clientele will also change.
Yeah, yeah. Because growth stock is for younger generations. Value in value and
Younger,
income stock is for the pensioners.
more for us.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, not for Toby. Toby is very much younger. He's the newer generation. All right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's in my belief also that the our telco companies, our telcos, um, they are the same companies who are investing in online banking. How about in your case in Malaysia?
Yeah. Our telcos, for example, DG and Maxis, they are applying for the license to be involved in digital banking.
Yeah.
I think they got their license already. I think earlier this year or late last year, they already got their license.
It is in my projections that they will transition from dividend stocks to growth stocks as well, because um, nowadays the telco landscape is very competitive.
Mm,
Before,
yeah.
you own one tower and you are the king of the world.
Yeah,
You own
yeah, yeah.
1,000 towers. Instead
Yeah.
of instead of putting their money in towers, they sell their towers using a sale leaseback. So one
Mm.
tower now is being owned by an independent third party who can cater multiple
Service providers.
multiple service providers. So
Mm.
there is now a barrier to entry for the smaller telcos.
Mm.
So what they need to do is to transition from being a cash cow and being a dividend payer to being a growth stock and invest more in digital banking. That's
Because I see that growth stocks or growth investors, they don't look forward, they are not looking for dividends because they are the type that is looking for future dividends, right? Future capital gains. That's why I think most of the companies are changing because they need a lot of capital.
yeah,
They
yeah,
need to use the retained earnings for growth. That's why Tesla has no dividends.
yeah.
Tesla has no dividends. Okay. It's like I'm it feels like the ones here involved here are the three of us.
The students, where are
As I
you?
listening in, I hope they get something from our sharing, our discussion, and I don't know. I really hope. How are you? How are you guys doing, students? Are you all okay?
Good.
Good.
Okay, madam.
Okay, madam.
Right.
Good,
Do
are
you
you?
have any
Want to ask
question?
anything to Toby, Sir Toby?
No.
So Toby has many experience in investing in stocks.
Not really, not really. I just move.
Okay. Oh, actually, they do have they do contribute to our discussion, our students, but they are doing it in the chat platform.
Oh, I cannot see the chat.
Ah, uh, because they do participate. Yes, madam. Yes, true. I think it's true. We are doing well. That's their reply. I think because of the line. We are also having problems with some of the lines here. As Mr. Toby has also experiencing.
So experiencing it now.
Yeah, experience it
If you have any
behind the
question,
scene.
you can probably type here as well. 1 or 2 questions before we
Yeah,
call it a day.
before.
Any question? You're going to have a quiz on this topic
Ah, you all are going to have a quiz, so you better take
based
note.
on this session.
So far, no question.
Hmm.
I think the reason why they do not have any question, Toby, is because your slide and your explanation is already clear. It's not because what I see is that you reiterate when you say things and then you reiterate you twice so that it's clear. I
Yeah.
think I'm going to use that also in my lecture
Yeah.
because I'm
Very
assuming that
helpful.
students
Just like,
understand, but maybe if we tell it a few times, it will register.
The kids' attention span nowadays are very they are
Short.
not focused much. So I have to do it twice, thrice, and
Yeah,
still
yeah,
fail in the exam.
yeah. I think it's very. The thing is, for exam purpose, you have to memorize a lot,
Yeah.
and that's a problem with most of our students. Because there are a lot of topics that they need to like compress within a
cram
very short
everything.
period of time. I think that's what we experienced before because we have gone through that.
Ah,
But I think this time is more challenging because their time is the online time. I see the difference between before, what you call it, before COVID and after
Pandemic.
COVID. Do
Mm.
you see that in your
yeah.
teaching?
It's very difficult
Change,
to
right?
yeah. But my concern is they were used to in the online setting where
Yeah.
the lecture is given to them, but they can open their Facebook, they can open their WhatsApp.
Yeah. And
Understand?
when they do exam online, this is what the students told me. When they do exam online, it's like very easy for them because it's open book.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, when they go for the face-to-face exam, the normal type of exam that we do before, they have to memorize. They have to do so many preparations, and it's affected their results. It
yeah.
does.
What I tell my students, but they do not
Mm.
follow. What I tell them is every day they should try answering 5 questions without looking at the notes.
Yeah.
Just just to
Mm.
make their mind used to with the fact that the notes will not be open.
Yeah,
So maybe
yeah.
3 or 5 questions per day just to make sure that your mind is focusing. And then
Yeah.
after they can just read or relax. I'm not really a believer in too much effort, but whenever they do work, they should focus. Uh,
Smart. It's not
yeah,
hard, is it? Working
yeah.
smart, not working hard. As compared to working hard. It's
The
yeah,
process they used to for 3 years, and then this is what's going to happen. I understand the challenge.
yeah. We understand the challenge. We are sympathizing. However, we cannot change the situation. So student, you all have to be very prepared. You have to change your mindset already. Okay? Everyone?
Excuse me, Madam and Mr. Toby. Can I please have? I would like to ask a question regarding our discussion just now. Um,
Continue.
Between dividends preference theory and the active dividend policy, which one is better and more practiced in the industry?
ah, so um, the active dividend policy can actually encompass the dividend preference theory because I have said in the active dividend policy, you should know what is the truth. In more than half of the times, people would love dividends. So you may incorporate that as your policy. So they are not in conflict. They're not necessarily in conflict. Actually, the active policy would mean that you're going to search for your clientele. And if the clientele tells you that, if the clientele, based on your observations, the clientele prefer the dividends, then that is what you do. But if your clientele are the young ones, no, the young ones who wrote, then by all means you can ignore the dividend preference theory. They are not in conflict. Okay, they are not in conflict.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Toby.
Thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate it when a student asks questions, because sometimes I do not know if someone's even listening, and by asking questions, I really think that I am a used being.
From the chats that I have, they are listening to be, because they are actively chatting.
that, that, that is shooting. Thank you.
They listen, but sometimes they are too lazy to switch on the mic.
I understand.
Or the
Yeah.
line is not stable.
When
I
we
think most
ask,
of the
it's just
time
like,
the line,
okay. They
the
don't want to
internet.
on and off the mic.
Okay, I think we can conclude this session.
Sure.
Madam June, Mr. Toby.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, so I think that's it for today. Thank you everyone for listening in and participating. And I hope everyone gets something from this lecture about dividend policy, because this is one of your topic for your, and you will be quizzed, inshallah. Okay. And thank you very much, Mr. Toby, for your lecture today. It's very interesting, very clear, and we open our minds to how corporations are setting their dividend policy. It's not just like by hunch or just because. Okay, all these actions by the corporations are based on things and based on something. So that's based on the theory that we listened just now. Okay, all right. So I hope to see Mr. Toby again. Inshallah,
Actually,
next
okay.
semester for another session. If you I hope you're willing to come again and enjoy our time together. Okay. And send our regards to Chris and to Freddie.
Yeah.
Freddie.
Fortunately, he didn't take up a load this term. That's why I'm alone.
Oh, okay. He's
See you next
taking other
term.
course. All right. Okay. That's it for today, everyone.
Excuse me, we need to take a group picture.
Can everyone on their camera, please? Because we want to record this.
Toby, we have another lecturer here actually. Miss Wan.
Yeah. This is Miss Wan.
She look like a student anyway. Very young.
Yeah.
Like you. The young ones.
Our junior, very much, because we're older, like we are nearly what do you call that? Retirement age. Girls and boys, can we have the your camera on, please?
We're gonna take pictures. Where are they?
We do not want to have the pictures of 4 of us.
Yeah.
Only.
Are you? Where are they? Together.
Hello.
Hello, can you on your cameras? Only the 4 of us. All this round thing only. Circles. Please on your camera, yeah. Are you people in here or where are you? We have
I'm chatting with them on the chat platform. I hope they are reading. Okay, wait,
Wait,
madam.
madam.
Everyone, smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more time.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Give us your biggest smile. 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Okay, done.
All right.
All
Okay.
right. So I'll see you all later. Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Ruby.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir.
Now only they will.
Yeah,
Now
now
only
you
they
can
know
hear
their
that.
voice.
Thank you from
Always like
Malaysia.
that.
All right. Good
Thank
effort,
you. That's all.
everyone.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Kita hang up je kan, Wan?
Yes, saya nak stop recording lah.
Stop recording ya.
Boleh je borak-borak lagi.
Okay.
Okey kan dividend policy tadi? Okey lah kan? Clear je I rasa.
Dah stop dah.